The silence in our house wasn't the peaceful kind anymore. It was heavy, like the air right before a massive storm breaks over the Indiana plains. Thick, suffocating, and charged with an electricity you can't see, but can definitely feel on your skin. My name is Mark, and for 7 years, I believed I was the architect of a perfect life. I didn't just build skyscrapers and commercial hubs in downtown Indianapolis. I thought I had built a marriage that could withstand any tremor. We lived in a quiet cul-de-sac in Carmel, in a house with a wraparound porch and a yard that was the envy of the neighborhood. But lately, the foundation was cracking, and I was the only one pretending not to hear the settling of the timber. Sarah was my everything, or at least the version of Sarah I held in my head was. She was vibrant, sharp. Anoran had a laugh that could cut through the gloomiest Monday morning, but over the last 6 months, that laugh had become a rare commodity. She started coming home late, her excuses as polished and cold as the marble countertops in our kitchen. The Q3 projections are a mess, Mark. Or, Julian needs me to spearhead the New York merger. Julian, her boss, a man who wore $4,000 suits and spoke in a tone that suggested the world was his personal chessboard. I wanted to trust her. I really did. Because in my world, if you don't have trust, the whole structure collapses. But then came the announcement of the Leadership Summit in Chicago. It wasn't just a meeting. It was a 3-day intensive at one of the most expensive hotels on the Magnificent Mile. Sarah told me Julian had personally handled the logistics. She booking executive suites to ensure the team was rested and focused. I watched her pack a suitcase on Tuesday night. She tucked away a backless silk gown, the kind of dress that isn't meant for a boardroom. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her fold that dress, feeling a cold knot of dread tighten in my stomach that no amount of logic could untie. The morning she left, the sun was a pale, sickly yellow peeking over the horizon. The air was crisp, smelling of damp earth and the neighbor's freshly cut grass. Sarah was buzzing with a strange, frantic energy. It wasn't the usual big meeting nerves. It was something else. An edge, a hunger. She moved through the house like a whirlwind, checking her reflection in every mirror she passed, adjusting her hair, dabbing a perfume I didn't recognize. It was a scent that smelled like jasmine and secrets. "You're sure you have everything?" I asked, leaning against the kitchen island, holding a mug of coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. "Yes, Mark. Laptop, charger, files. I told you, Julian expects us to be on our A game. This deal could put me in the VP chair by Christmas." She didn't look at me when she said it. She was busy checking her gold watch, a gift she'd bought herself after her last bonus. "It seems like a lot for a summit," I murmured, my voice sounding small in the vastness of our open concept kitchen. The hotel, the dress, with the overnight stay. She stopped, her hand hovering over her suitcase handle. For a split second, the mask slipped. A flash of irritation, maybe even guilt, crossed her eyes before she smoothed it over with a practiced smile. "It's business, honey. This is how the big leagues play. Don't be so provincial." She walked over and kissed my cheek. It was a dry, clinical kiss, the kind you give a relative you haven't seen in years. As she pulled her suitcase toward the garage, the wheels clicking against the hardwood floor sounded like a countdown. I watched her taillights disappear down the street, and the silence that rushed back into the house was so loud it made my ears ring. I'm an architect. My entire career is built on the pursuit of structural integrity. I know how to spot a flaw in a beam before the weight is even applied. But sitting in my dark home office that evening, surrounded by blueprints of buildings that would likely outlast my marriage, I felt like a fraud. I had spent years ignoring the flaws in my own home. I tried to work, but the lines on the screen blurred. My mind kept drifting back to the way she hadn't looked at me, the way she guarded her phone like it was a holy relic. We had a shared cloud account for our photos and documents. We'd set it up years ago, a symbol of our total transparency. I had never checked it, not once. To me, privacy was a pillar of a healthy relationship. But tonight, the pillar was crumbling. I logged in, my fingers trembling on the keyboard. I felt like a criminal in my own home. At first, it was mundane. Photos of the dog, screenshots of recipes, work PDFs. But then I noticed the recently deleted folder. Oh, I clicked it. My breath hitched. There were photos of Sarah I'd never seen, selfies taken in bathroom mirrors where she looked different. She looked alive. She looked like she was preening for an audience. And then a notification popped up on the sync tablet she'd left charging on the desk. It was an email confirmation from the Grand Regency in Chicago. I opened it, hoping, praying, to see a block of rooms for a corporate team. The reservation was for a single penthouse honeymoon suite, reserved under Julian's name, for 2 guests. The room included a romance package, champagne, rose petals, and a late checkout. The floor felt like it was tilting at a 45-degree angle. The woman I had kissed goodbye that morning was currently checking into a room designed for lovers with a man who signed her paychecks. I spent the next 3 hours in a state of localized shock. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just paced. I walked from the kitchen to the living room, then to the foyer, then back again. I counted the steps. I looked at our wedding photos on the wall, the black and white shot of us dancing at the country club in Zionsville. I looked at the man in that photo and felt a deep, piercing pity for him. He had no idea the woman in his arms was a ghost. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Julian was just arrogant and booked the best room for himself, and Sarah was in a standard room down the hall. Maybe it was a mistake, but the recently deleted photos told a different story. They were photos of her in lingerie I'd never bought her. Then my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Sarah. My heart leapt into my throat, kinda thinking maybe she was calling to say she missed me. But as I read the words, the world went cold. He's so clueless. He actually thinks I'm at a seminar. He stayed behind to hold down the fort like the good little soldier he is. The room is amazing, Julian. You really outdid yourself with the view of the lake. Since you paid for the hotel and the suite, I definitely owe you a fun night. I'm in the shower now. Hurry up. She hadn't realized she'd sent it to me. In her rush of adrenaline, she'd clicked the wrong M name in her recent contacts. Mark, not Julian. The betrayal wasn't just the act, it was the contempt. Clueless. Good little soldier. She wasn't just cheating, she was mocking the very foundation of the man who loved her. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far on this story below. I read every single one. I didn't reply. I didn't call her and give her the chance to lie or delete the evidence. I grabbed my leather jacket and my car keys. I didn't even pack a bag. I walked out of the house, locked the door, and got into my SUV. The engine roared to life, a low mechanical growl that matched the vibration in my chest. The drive from Indianapolis to Chicago is usually a boring stretch of I-65, a 3-hour journey through cornfields and windmills. But that night, the highway felt like a tunnel leading to the end of my life. I drove with a terrifying focus. The speedometer climbed. 80, 85, 90. I didn't care about tickets. I didn't care about the rain that started to smear across the windshield. Every mile I drove, I peeled back a layer of our history. I remembered the late nights last summer. I remembered the time she lost her wedding ring at the gym and had to get a replacement. I remembered the sudden change in her wardrobe, the expensive shoes that were on sale, the way she'd started critiquing my career, calling my firm stagnant. She had been preparing to leave me for months. She had been building a bridge to a new life while I was still trying to shore up the old one. By the time the Chicago skyline appeared, a jagged crown of lights against the black velvet of Lake Michigan, I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a witness. The Grand Regency was a monument to excess. It towered over the city, a pillar of glass and steel that looked down on the rest of the world. I pulled into the valet, tossed the keys to a startled young man, and walked through the revolving doors. And the lobby was filled with the scent of expensive lilies and floor wax. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that only exists in places where people pay a lot of money to be left alone. I approached the front desk. My reflection in the polished granite looked like a ghost. Pale, dark circles under my eyes, jaw set tight. The clerk was a woman in her mid-20s, her name tag reading Elena. She gave me a professional practice smile. "Welcome to the Regency, sir. Do you have a reservation?" "My wife is staying here," I said. My voice was raspy like I'd been swallowing sand. Sarah Miller. She's part of the leadership summit. I I drove up to surprise her. It's our anniversary. It was a lie, but it felt like the only way to get through the door. She tapped away at her keyboard. Ah, yes, Mrs. Miller. She's in the penthouse north. Room 402. She hesitated, looking at my disheveled appearance. Is everything all right, sir? I reached into my wallet and pulled out a photo of our wedding. I didn't say anything. I just held it up. I think she saw the sheer, vibrating grief in my eyes. She didn't ask for ID. She didn't call upstairs. Maybe she was a romantic, or maybe she just wanted me away from her desk. She swiped a key card and handed it to me. Elevators are to the left, sir. Floor 40. I took the card. It felt cold and sharp. As I walked toward the gold-plated elevators, the hum of the building felt like a countdown. I was about to walk into the wreckage of my own life. If you were in my shoes, standing in that lobby with that key card in your hand, would you have the courage to go up, or would you turn around and drive home? Share your thoughts in the comments. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like descending into a tomb, despite the fact that I was ascending. The gold-leafed mirrors on the elevator walls reflected a man I didn't recognize. My eyes were bloodshot from the drive. My jaw set so tight it felt like the bone might crack. The soft instrumental jazz playing through the speakers was an insult to the chaos screaming inside my head. The ding of the elevator reaching the penthouse level sounded like a bell at a funeral. The hallway was a cathedral of silence. The carpet was thick, a deep crimson that looked like dried blood under the dim sconces. Every footstep I took was swallowed by the fabric, making me feel like a ghost haunting my own life. I found room 402 at the very end of the hall. It wasn't just a door. It was a double-door entrance with mahogany paneling. I stood there, the key card trembling in my hand. Then I heard it, a muffled peal of laughter. Her laughter. It was a sound that used to be my sanctuary, the sound I looked forward to hearing at the end of a long day at the firm. But here, in this sterile, expensive hallway, it sounded like a jagged blade. There was a deeper voice, too. Julian's, mumbling something I couldn't make out, followed by the clink of glass. They were celebrating. They were toasting to a successful lie. I closed my eyes for a single second, prayed for a strength I didn't think I possessed, and pressed the card to the sensor. The light on the reader flickered from red to green with a mechanical click that felt like a hammer hitting a nail. I pushed the doors open. The suite was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the sparkling expanse of Lake Michigan, the city lights dancing on the water like fallen stars. But the beauty was a backdrop for a nightmare. The room smelled of expensive cologne and Sarah's favorite perfume. She was standing by the window, silhouetted against the Chicago skyline. She was wearing that silk, backless gown, the one she'd packed so carefully in Carmel. She held a crystal flute of champagne, her head tilted back as she laughed. Julian was sitting on the edge of the king-size bed, his suit jacket discarded, his silk tie loosened around his neck. When the door swung open, the laughter died instantly. It was replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Sarah turned, the smile freezing on her face. Her eyes went wide, reflecting a mixture of shock, confusion, and then a searing, white-hot guilt. "Mark!" Her voice was a strangled whisper. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It didn't just break. It exploded against the hardwood floor, shards of crystal spraying across the rug. I didn't look at the glass. I didn't look at Julian, who was now scrambling to his feet, trying to maintain some semblance of executive dignity. I looked only at her. "I thought you were at a seminar, Sarah," I said. My voice was eerily calm, the kind of calm that sits at the center of a hurricane. "I didn't realize the leadership summit required a honeymoon suite and a bottle of Veuve Clicquot." Julian was the first to find his voice. He tried to puff out his chest, stepping forward as if he were still in a boardroom. "Now look here, Mark. And this isn't what it looks like. There was a logistical error with the bookings. Sarah and I were just discussing the morning presentation." I finally turned my gaze to him. I'd seen Julian at office holiday parties, a man who prided himself on being the smartest person in the room. Now he just looked like a middle-aged man caught in a sordid cliché. A logistical error that includes rose petals on the duvet and a text message about owing you a fun night? I asked. Sarah's face went from pale to a ghostly translucent white. She moved toward me, her hands reaching out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. The thought of her skin touching mine made my stomach turn. "Mark, please," she sobbed, the tears finally breaking through. I was I was confused. Work has been so stressful, and Julian, he made me feel like I was important again. It was a mistake, a horrible, stupid mistake. I love you. You don't love me, Sarah, I said, and for the first time my voice cracked. You love the life I built for you. You love the good little soldier who kept the house running while you were out playing VP with your boss. But that soldier just went AWOL. I walked past her, ignoring her pleas, and went straight to the luggage rack where her suitcase sat. It was open, her expensive clothes spilling out. Clothes I had encouraged her to buy, clothes I had told her she looked beautiful in. I grabbed the suitcase and dumped the rest of it onto the floor. "What are you doing?" Julian barked, trying to regain some authority. "I'm simplifying your life, Julian," I said, looking at him with a coldness that seemed to finally make him realize the gravity of the situation. "Since you paid for the hotel, you can keep the guest, but she doesn't live in my house anymore." I turned back to Sarah, who was crumpled against the window, her silk dress shimmering under the dim lights. She looked like a broken doll. "The locks will be changed by the time you get back to Carmel. Your things will be in the driveway. Don't call me, don't text me. Talk to my lawyer." She started to wail then, a high, thin sound that echoed off the glass walls. I didn't stay to hear the rest. I turned my back on the lake, the penthouse, and the woman I'd spent 7 years trying to protect. As I walked back toward the elevator, I felt a strange, hollow sensation in my chest. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the end of the line. And the drive back to Indianapolis was different from the drive up. The adrenaline had faded, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion that made every limb feel like it was made of lead. The rain had stopped, leaving the highway slick and reflective. I drove in total silence. No radio, no podcasts, just the sound of the wind rushing past the glass. I called my brother David at 4 a.m. He's a partner at one of the most aggressive family law firms in the state. He picked up on the third ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Mark, what's wrong? Is it Mom?" "No," I said, staring at the white lines of the Aju 65. "It's Sarah. She's in Chicago with Julian. I have the evidence, Dave. I need the best divorce papers money can buy, and I need them served before the sun goes down." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. David knew how much I'd invested in Sarah. He'd seen me work 80-hour weeks to make sure she had everything she wanted. "I'm sorry, brother," he said softly. "Consider it done. Get home safe. Don't do anything stupid." "I already did the stupid thing, Dave," I replied. I believed her. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Carmel, the neighborhood was starting to wake up. Joggers were out, and the morning paper was being delivered. It looked like a normal Thursday, but for me it was day one of a new scorched earth reality. I didn't sleep. I spent the morning in a feverish blur. I called a locksmith. I called a junk removal service to bring me 24 heavy-duty wardrobe boxes. I went through the house with a surgical precision, removing every trace of her existence. Her vanity, her shoes, her books, the live, laugh, we love sign her mother had given us for our anniversary. I packed it all. At 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was David. "The filing is at the courthouse. We're requesting an emergency hearing for temporary possession of the marital home based on the evidence of her intent to abandon the marriage. And Mark." I checked Julian's company bylaws. They have a very specific morality clause for senior executives regarding subordinates. "Do you want me to hold off?" I looked at the boxes lining the hallway. I thought about the text message. He's so clueless. "No," I said, "drop the hammer. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments." As the divorce proceedings moved from a quiet filing to a public collision, the cracks in the dam didn't just leak, they burst. My brother David sat me down in his glass-walled office in downtown Indianapolis, a thick manila folder between us. "Mark," he said, his voice heavy with the kind of news that changes a man's history. We started digging into the shared accounts and the credit trail. This wasn't a one-time mistake in Chicago. I felt the air leave my lungs. I thought I knew the extent of the betrayal, but I was looking at a map of a life I didn't recognize. David flipped through the pages, bank statements, GPS logs from her car's built-in navigation, and itemized receipts from business dinners that took place on our wedding anniversary, our birthdays, and even the week my father passed away. And she's been using the joint emergency fund to cover incidentals for Julian for nearly 18 months, David explained. The weekend in Aspen? She told you it was a girls' trip. Julian's name is on the lift tickets. The late nights at the office? Her car was at a boutique hotel in Broad Ripple. The betrayal tripled in a heartbeat. It wasn't just a physical affair. It was a financial and emotional heist. She hadn't just stolen my trust. She had been subsidizing her romance with my hard-earned money while I was working double shifts to pay off the mortgage. I realized then that I hadn't been a husband. I'd been a silent partner in my own replacement. Friends we had known for years started calling, their voices thick with practiced sympathy. "We suspected something," they'd say. "Yeah, but we didn't want to cause drama." The silence of my friends hurt almost as much as the noise of her lies. I was standing in the middle of a life I'd built, and I realized I was the only one who hadn't seen the termites. Revenge, I learned, isn't about a single moment of anger. It's about a slow, methodical dismantling of everything the other person values more than you. For Sarah and Julian, that was their status. They cared about the VP titles, the high-rise offices, and the image of the power couple. I didn't have to break any laws. I just had to tell the truth to the people who mattered. Julian's company, Evercrest Logistics, prided itself on an ethics-first corporate culture. They had a strict anti-fraternization policy, especially concerning the use of company funds for personal indiscretions. I spent an afternoon scanning every hotel receipt, every honeymoon suite confirmation, and that final, devastating text message. "He's so clueless. Since you paid for the hotel, I definitely owe you a fun night." I sent a digital package to the board of directors and the chief ethics officer. I didn't add a nasty note. I didn't threaten them. I simply sent the fax with a subject line: "Misuse of corporate travel funds, Julian Vane." The fallout was instantaneous. By Monday morning, Julian was escorted out of the building by security. His leadership summit had cost the company thousands in luxury perks for a mistress, and the board wasn't in a forgiving mood. Sarah, as his direct subordinate and accomplice in the expense fraud, was terminated within the hour. They lost their salaries, their bonuses, and their reputations in a single afternoon. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in my story and share your thoughts in the comments. The months following the Great Collapse were the hardest of my life. I sold the house in Carmel. Every corner of it was haunted by the memory of a woman who never truly existed. I moved into a modern, minimalist loft in the wholesale district of Indy, a place with exposed brick, high ceilings, and no history. I needed a space where the air didn't taste like betrayal. I threw myself into my work. I stopped designing suburban homes and started focusing on large-scale civic projects. Libraries, parks, spaces meant for the public good. There's a certain therapy in building things that are meant to be open and honest. Well, I spent my weekends hiking with my dog, Cooper, in Brown County, letting the quiet of the woods settle the buzzing in my brain. I learned to cook for one. I learned to enjoy the silence. I started seeing a therapist who helped me understand that I wasn't clueless. I was loyal. And in a world full of Julians and Sarahs, loyalty is a superpower, even if it leaves you vulnerable to the wrong people. I wasn't rebuilding a marriage. I was rebuilding a man. I was learning to trust my own eyes again, to believe that I was worth more than a fun night at a luxury hotel. I saw Sarah one last time 6 months later. It was a cold, gray Tuesday in November. I was leaving the courthouse after the final decree was signed. She was standing by the fountain, huddled in a coat that looked a few years too old for her. The designer bags were gone. When the VP glow had vanished, She looked like a woman who had realized, too late, that the grass on the other side was actually just a painted concrete floor. She tried to stop me as I walked toward my car. "Mark," she said, her voice thin and shaking. I just, I wanted to say I'm sorry. Julian is gone. He moved back to his ex-wife in Ohio. I have nothing left." I looked at her, and for the first time in 7 years, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no longing, no desire for an apology. "I know you have nothing left, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, "but you didn't lose it when I sent those emails. You lost it the moment you decided that my love wasn't enough to keep you honest." I didn't wait for her to respond. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a long goodbye. I got into my car and drove away, watching her figure shrink in the rearview mirror until she was just a small, dark speck against the Indiana sky. The story wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. If you're watching this and you're feeling that same cold knot in your stomach, that feeling that something isn't right, that the person sleeping next to you is a stranger, don't ignore it. Don't let them call you clueless or paranoid. Trust is a gift, but it shouldn't be a blindfold. I learned that the most important structure an architect can build isn't made of steel or glass. It's made of boundaries. It's the ability to say no to people who treat your kindness as a weakness. Sarah thought she could play me because I was a good soldier, but she forgot that soldiers know how to fight when the war comes to their doorstep. I'm standing on a new foundation now. It's smaller, simpler, and built on the truth. It might not have a wraparound porch or a view of the lake, but it's solid. And in this life, solid is the only thing that matters. If you were in my shoes facing a betrayal that stripped away everything you believed in, how would you find the strength to rebuild? Share your thoughts in the comments. This journey from the suburbs of Indianapolis to a penthouse in Chicago and back again has been the most grueling project of my life. But I'm still standing. I'm still building. And I'm finally living a life where the secrets have all been dragged into the light. The silence in my home isn't heavy anymore. It's peaceful. It's the sound of a man who knows exactly who he is and exactly what he's worth. I survived the fun night that cost my wife everything, and I came out the other side with my integrity intact. Thank you so much for watching. This story was a heavy one to tell, and it took a lot of strength to put these words down, but sharing it with you all is part of the healing process. If you found this story compelling, or if it helped you realize something in your own life, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to our channel, Family Secrets and Revenge. We are dedicated to bringing you cinematic, raw, and real stories of betrayal, justice, and the truth that hides behind closed doors. Don't forget to share your overall thoughts on my story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'm looking forward to reading your perspectives. See you in the next one.